program.
Our opening words this morning are from Simone Weil. Truth is all the thoughts that surge in the mind of a thinking creature whose unique, total, exclusive desire is for truth. Mendacity, error, the two words are synonymous for those of you who aren't familiar with mendacity, are the thoughts of those who do not desire truth, or those who desire truth plus something else. Yet, how can we desire truth if we have no prior knowledge of it? This is the mystery of all mysteries. Words that express a perfection which no mind can conceive of. God, truth, justice, silently evoked with desire, but without any preconception, have the power to lift up the soul and flood it with light. It is when we desire truth with an empty soul and without attempting to guess its content that we receive the light.
Hi again. I would like to invite my young friends to come up for a story.
All the leprechauns.
How's everybody doing today? Let's see what's in our wonder box. Who wants to open it? Annalise, come here. What do we have? Yarn. A ball of yarn. What can we do with that?
Make stuff.
Can make stuff. I have an idea. You want to see? You start. Let's start it. Okay, hold this end. We're going to pass it around to all our friends, and everybody's going to hold on to some of the yarn. While you guys work on that, everybody get some hands on that yarn. Let's keep it loose so nobody gets clotheslined. Do you know that we are all connected? You can sit down for the story, Annalise, but hold on to the yarn. Sit wherever you like. Yeah, get back to your pillow. Good thinking. So yeah, we are all connected, not just with yarn, but to each other, to the earth, and to the universe. There's more left. It's true. And in fact, our 7th principle talks about respect for the interconnected web that we are all a part of. Today, in service, the grown-ups are talking about truth, and in class we're going to focus on nature and spring because it is just about here. And I thought this story would be a good one for today. It's called You Are Stardust. Have you ever heard it? I love it. It's really one of my favorites, and I hope you like it too. You are stardust. Every tiny atom in your body came from a star that exploded long before you were born. You started life as a single cell. So did all other creatures on planet Earth. Like fish deep in the ocean, you called salt water home. You swam inside the salty sea of the womb in the months before you were born. Salt still flows through your veins, your sweat and your tears. The sea within you is as salty as the ocean. The water swirling in your glass once filled the puddles where dinosaurs drank. From ocean to sky to land and back again, the same water has been quenching thirsts for millions of years. You learned to speak the same way baby birds learn to sing, by chatting with your parents and loved ones. Ba, 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 says a baby. Tweet, 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 says a bird. Be still. Listen. Like you, the earth breathes. Your breath is alive with the promise of flowers. Each time you blow a kiss to the world, you spread pollen that might grow to be a new plant. Inside your brain, electricity stronger than lightning powers your every thought. You sneeze with the force of a tornado. Wind rockets from your nose quicker than a cheetah sprints. You grow at night when your bones are resting, just like the sheep you count to help you sleep. You may sprout even taller in the spring and summer, just like plants in your garden. Your hair falls like autumn leaves. You tend to shed the most hair in early autumn and save your thickest growth for the heart of winter. Your body constantly changes. New cells line your stomach every 3 days. You'll replace your skin 100 times by the time you turn 10. Just as forests grow new trees in place of old ones, you grow entirely new skeletons throughout your life. If you were a planet, you'd be a lot like Earth. Rainforests on land and algae in the oceans are the Earth's lungs. From your head to your toes, inside and out, billions of teeny microorganisms live on planet You. You know how it feels to be a good friend, and so do other animals. Bats and sperm whales get their friends to babysit. Elephants remain best buddies for life. You, me, birds flying through the rainforest. We're all connected. We are all nature. We are all stardust. Isn't that so cool? I love that story.
Many nights we prayed with no proof anyone could hear. In our hearts a hope for a song we barely understood. Now we are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. so often proves in vain. Hope seems like the summer bird too swiftly flown away. Yet now I'm standing here, my heart so full I can't explain, seeking faith and speaking words I never thought I'd say. There can be miracles when you believe, though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Who knows what miracles you can achieve when you believe? Somehow you will. Somehow you will. You will when you believe. You will when you believe.
So this morning I have brought you some wisdom from Mr. Rogers. He's one of my favorite people. This is from Mr. Rogers, Does It Rain in Your Neighborhood? And it's a book, I may have brought this book before because I love this book, but it's a book full of different things that were written to Mr. Rogers and then the letters that he sent back to the kids. So, Dear Mr. Rogers, why do you show the trolley controls? And Mr. Rogers writes, Dear Mark, one of the best things about doing a television series over many years is the opportunity to grow in our work. And as I've learned more and developed in my work, Mark is older, which is why this is not simplistic language for children. Mark is 20. And as I've learned more and developed in my work, I've been able to rethink some of the ways we've approached things in the past. It was in the mid-1970s that we decided to show the trolley controls in my television house. And that's because I felt it would be helpful for children to know that machines like trolleys don't operate independently of people. I think it's important to emphasize for children that it's people who make the machines work, especially because young children have a tough time understanding what's real and what's pretend. We've talked about the trolley controls and the picture-picture machine. We've even shown our viewers the whole studio on certain occasions, because I think it's healthy to demystify this medium of television as much as we can. And then this is just a little bit of his philosophy. He says, it's obvious that young children have a hard time understanding about television. They're trying to figure out how the world works, and one of their major tasks is to discover what in this world is real and what's pretend. Television can be especially confusing because it has things like special effects and animation and close-ups, and it distorts the line between reality and fantasy. Questions that I receive, like, are you real, also help confirm something I've long believed. Children do need grown-ups nearby when they're watching television to help with their wonderings. We can't take for granted that children understand what they see and hear on television. So what do children need from adults in those kinds of discussions? For something as complicated and abstract as television, the children certainly don't need technical answers. Even simple explanations may not work. When I explained to a boy who asked, how did you get out of the box, that television was just a way to show pictures, he nodded through the whole explanation as if he understood. And then he asked, but Mr. Rogers, how are you going to get back in?
Yes, that makes sense. With love and gratitude, every Sunday, we share our cash plate offering with a cause worthy of our support. We recognize the value of our religious exploration program, so on the third Sunday of each month, we share half our plate collection with the religious exploration program to offset special expenses, such as OWL, Our Whole Lives, facilitator training, coming-of-age trips, and unique learning opportunities like today's guest speakers following service. Our speakers today have requested a donation in lieu of a presenter's fee to the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice in Princeton, which is an organization which provides programs focusing on civics, community activism, and cultural instruction. The RE team has decided to use this month's split plate as a donation to this worthy organization. Our RE program, as you know, along with our Sunday services and community outreach, are the heart and soul of our congregation. Please be generous. Thank you. The offering has been given with love and received with gratitude. Thank you for your generosity. We need a bigger congregation so we can hear more music during the offertory. Pass it slowly. And now we have Emily.
That was truly awesome, like the X-Files. Yay! Although if you've watched any of the old episodes, their cell phones were huge. So, the truth is out there. I thought about starting this with like alien conspiracies or with, big government conspiracies and people smoking cigarettes in the shadows, but instead I decided to start with the Declaration of Independence, the founding document of our nation. And that states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And when I read that, I wonder, do we still hold to these truths? Do we still believe that all people are created equal? Well, sometimes it feels like we're maintaining a polite fiction of equality, but when you hear the news this week, being born into wealth means that some animals are more equal than others. Case in point, those wealthy families who paid up to $500,000 to get their kids into college. That goes beyond helicopter parenting or even lawnmower parenting. That's like B-1 bomber parenting. No problems for you, it's all gone. And then we think, well, okay, but maybe we can certainly say that everyone is entitled to life, And then we think about the news story that those perpetrators of hate who just days ago massacred men, women, and children in Christchurch, New Zealand, as they knelt praying in their sacred space, living a life of peace in a country where some people don't look like you or worship like you, sounds like it's some kind of offense that deserves death in some people's minds. And how is that possible? And I admit that I was naive enough to believe that lone gunmen perpetrating mass murders was pretty much a United States problem. But it's not. It's everywhere, and we need to be aware. I don't have words for this type of atrocity. I have hope that we can learn to work together so it never happens again. I have hope but not belief. And newsflash, every single one of us lives in a country where some people do not look like us. Okay, but then maybe all are entitled to liberty. We can still agree on liberty, right? Well, ours is a criminal justice system in which the color of your skin can determine the outcome of your trial. You may have heard that Paul Manafort received a total sentence of 7.5 years in 2 different trials for bank fraud, tax evasion, and illegal lobbying. And I was listening to Morning Edition on NPR on Friday, and I heard Hannah Rosen from Invisibilia telling the story of Jarrell Daniels. Jarrell Daniels was 18 when he and his friends posted a picture where they're standing together in a stairwell, flashing pretend gang signs and grinning at each other. And later, the police arrested Daniels and a large number of his friends and acquaintances on suspicion of gang activity. The photo of him and his friends standing in the stairwell of their building, that was included and part of the evidence against him. And he didn't get a trial, he just pled guilty and received a sentence of 6 years. The irony is that when that picture was taken, Daniels was actually home for the weekend from a Job Corps program where he had been attending school from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day, getting an hour off, and then going and working at McDonald's from 3 until 10 every single day, and he was only allowed to come home on the weekends. So he was home just for the weekend and saying goodbye to his neighborhood, saying, "I made it, I got out," to his friends. He was getting his life together. And let me just say that if social media had been a thing when I was Jarrell Daniels' age, they would not have been calling the cops on me. They would have been stockpiling garlic and calling Van Helsing. So it's pretty well established that social media is not real life. What people put on social media is a carefully curated version of their life that gives them social capital in the circles in which they move. Shankar Vedantam from NPR, you can tell I'm mentioning NPR every other word, so I must be an NPR listener and a supporter. Shankar Vedantam from the NPR podcast The Hidden Brain tells the story of Rachel Leonard. She's just like most people who kept touch with all of her friends on Facebook after school, like after she was done with all of her schooling. And she was moving from city to city, doing different jobs. She was backpacking through Colombia, posting all that on Facebook. But watching Facebook made her feel like she was falling behind. She was falling behind her friends who were not out having adventures in the Colombian rainforest, but were getting married and buying houses and having children. And she felt like she needed to do the same. And so she did. She bought a house in the Blue Ridge Mountains with her husband. They eventually had a child. And she posted pictures of her beautiful view off of her front porch. And it was truly a beautiful view, especially if you managed to crop the giant factory out of the picture on the east side. And it wasn't until her marriage failed that she found out that many of the friends whose lives she had been envying on Facebook were in the same position that she was, desperately unhappy, desperately trying to keep up with one another, but with Facebook lives that appeared perfect. So, is your social media life your actual life, just with some of the less attractive parts cropped out. So does that make it the truth? Okay, maybe we can't answer that right away. But I'm going to give you a truth that we can all get behind. All right? Here we go. What goes up must come down. Pretty basic truth, right? Okay, so let's talk about Voyager 1. Voyager 1 was launched on September 5th, 1977, and it officially passed out of the solar bubble, so all the way out into interstellar space, in August of 2012. It did go up. It's probably not going to come down. Does that make what comes up must go down not the truth? So when I'm thinking about gravity, the first name that comes to mind is Sir Isaac Newton. According to Elizabeth Nix of History.com, Isaac Newton, the Sir part was added later as an acknowledgement that he was a great contributor to science. So he was just born to a wealthy farmer, family of wealthy farmers. And he was born in 1642, outside of Grantham, England. He was sent to study at Cambridge University in 1661. And then in 1665, there was a big outburst of bubonic plague, so he had to come home because they closed the school. And we're talking about closing the school for measles. And then he did return to school a couple years later. So according to William Stukeley's 1752 biography of Newton, it was during this time when the school was closed that Newton was sitting in the garden in the shade of his apple trees, drinking tea, and, as he said, the notion of gravitation came into his mind, occasioned by the fall of an apple as he sat in a contemplative mood. And just to clear this up, there is no indication that the apple actually hit him on the head. That's just something that makes school children remember it. So to refresh your memory on Sir Isaac Newton's law of gravity, I'm going to borrow from the website, The Physics Classroom. I have to borrow from a website because I never took physics. So, Newton's law states that the force of gravitational attraction between Earth and other objects is directly proportional to the mass of the Earth and the mass of the other object, and inversely proportional, so the opposite direction slope if you're doing the little graphing, and inversely proportional to the distance between the center of the Earth and the center of the other object. And the thing that made Newton's work groundbreaking was that he didn't just posit that this was the conditions on Earth. He thought that this would apply to the entire universe. And looking at the way Newton's law actually works shows us how an object like Voyager 1 space probe can exit the gravity of Earth, because you can apply enough force to reach a distance from Earth where the attraction between the space probe and Earth is too weak to pull that probe back in. So I never did take physics in high school or college. So for me, gravity is more a belief than a truth, because I can't prove gravity, but I'm pretty sure it acts on me anyhow. So there are lots of things out there that we believe as truth. Sometimes it's because we repeat them, we hear them repeated so much. Sometimes it's because of things that we see with our own eyes that we can posit must happen everywhere. So a story that really struck me about truth was from Kathleen Norris's book, Amazing Grace. She had a chapter that was called On Belief, Doubt, and Sacred Ambiguity. And she told the story of a seminary student who was speaking to an Orthodox theologian at Yale Divinity School. The theologian had been speaking on the development of Christian creeds. And the student asked, well, what can one do when one finds it impossible to affirm certain tenets of the creed? Well, the theologian responded, well, then you just say the creed. And the student repeated the question from a different angle, but I cannot believe in the creed. And the theologian said, yeah, and then you say the creed. And Norris came back in her chapter and took this as a musing about the heart and repetition, and she felt that the theologian's point was that anything could be reconciled with enough repetition. And I kind of take that in the same light as hearing, the same top 40 song over and over on the radio, and you start out thinking, oh, I hate this thing. And by the end, you're like singing along because it's so familiar, you've heard it like 100 times in the past week. Oh yeah, I know this one. But I think in this case, the student's point is more, what do you do if you do not want to reconcile with a part of the creed? What if you don't want to be the person who can believe or affirm in a specific aspect of what you've been taught? Not that you could not, with enough repetition, find comfort in the familiarity of the words and of the feeling of connectedness and togetherness that those words evoke. Not that you could not, with enough repetition, find the grace in those words, but that those words will never be your truth. Now, I don't know what the student was specifically having trouble with. There are at least 3 different Christian creeds that I found. The Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Chalcedonian Creed. It might have been something more obscure than that. But all of us have things that we repeat enough that they become true for us, or that we refuse to repeat, we refuse to make peace with until they become true. I'm going to give you an example of something that I've been repeating to myself that I have to try to refuse to make true. So I was leafing through Peter Singer's 1995 book on ethics called How Are We to Live? And I ran across this remarkable passage. So Singer was describing the 1980s as the decade of greed, and he was going back on, this was the time when you could be 25 and get into arbitrage trading, and suddenly you're a multimillionaire. And he had a quote that's from a person who made a big chunk of their fortune during that era of decadence. See if you can determine who said this. They said, "It's a rare person who can achieve a major goal in life and not almost immediately start feeling sad, empty, and a little lost. If you look at the record, which in this case means newspapers, magazines, TV news, you'll see that an awful lot of people who achieve success, from Elvis Presley to Ivan Boesky, they lose their direction or their ethics. Well, actually, I don't have to look at anyone else's life to know that's true. I'm as susceptible to that pitfall as anyone else." So does anyone have an idea of who might have said that? I showed it to my husband, and he was like, "No clue." You got it! Whoa! Awesome sauce. Trump. It was Trump. It was President number 45. I don't usually use his first name or last name, ever. So I apologize for showing my politics, but I do not trust our current president. However, reading that sentence, I realized that I have not given that man enough credit for being insightful. That first sentence was pretty insightful, or for being self-aware. And that second sentence was both self-aware and prophetic. So something that I thought was true about that man's intellect is, upon further review, less true. So my belief has to change, and the truth is not exactly what I thought it was. That line between truth and belief is very slim. So I have on the wall next to my computer a quote that reads, "It is okay for you to believe whatever you believe. It is not okay, however, for you to insist that everyone else believe the same as you." I didn't write down the source, I just wrote the quote on the little Post-it note, so I don't know actually who said that. But I have that up on my computer desk as a reminder that one of the unalienable rights that were guaranteed by our Constitution is freedom of religion. That First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The Constitution reminds us that not even an act of Congress can tell us how to respect the sacred in our lives. Only our own conscience can do that. That's not just a foundational truth of our country. It's also a foundational truth of our faith. As UUs, we have the responsibility and the right to determine our own path toward honoring what's at the heart of things. But if you take away the context of religion, I don't know that I still should be upholding that quote or holding it as high as I do. Take, for example, the concerned parents who refuse vaccinations for their children. Now, I have a belief. I believe that vaccines work, mostly because there's a whole lot of scientific evidence on my side and no scientific evidence on the other side. But I also kind of believe it's okay for me to insist that everyone else believe the same as I do in the case of vaccines. To call the people who do not trust vaccines anti-vaxxers is to dismiss that they have strong feelings and strong beliefs about their cause. But I really want them to believe that vaccination helps more than it harms, that vaccinations are safe, and that it's worse to get the disease that vaccines protect against than take the side effects of the vaccine. And there are other similar concerns. What about people who believe that the earth is flat? I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt anyone to believe that the earth is flat, but there are people out there who genuinely, honestly have that belief in their hearts, despite science. And no matter what kind of proof you can give them, what kind of experiments you can show them, how this works, how to show that we're living on a round ball, what pictures from space, they won't accept what I see as truth. Or what about the people who believe that climate change is either A, not happening, or B, not harmful? Do we have the responsibility to try to impose, well, I'm assuming that you guys believe what I do, maybe you don't, but do we have the responsibility to try to sway people to the side of climate change? What about the people who believe that having a different religion or a different skin tone or a different culture is a crime that deserves death? Don't we have a responsibility to try to sway those beliefs too? Well, on a lighter note, when I was a child, the truth was that if you wanted a door to open or a channel on the television to change, you had to walk up to it and do it yourself. And as an adult, I take for granted that the automatic doors to the grocery store are going to open when I get close enough, although not as fast as I want, and that the self-check line in Target is going to work when I push the thing across, and that I can watch any television channel that I want without getting up from underneath my Snuggie. So maybe the truth is always the same, but our understanding of the truth changes. Recently, I watched an episode of a cartoon that I loved to watch as a child. She-Ra. Anybody watch She-Ra? Princess of Power? Do, 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 do. So the protagonist was pretty and had long blonde hair. And back then, diversity meant that one of the characters had red hair and one of the characters had blue hair. And you know, if it wasn't for the different hair colors and costumes, you wouldn't have been able to tell the characters apart. The good guy characters would have all looked alike, tall, slim, improbably proportioned. And the villains, you could tell the villains apart because they ranged from merely brunette to actively monstrous. And the leader of the villains, he had to be a guy because, you know, girls can't lead a mixed gender force, so he had to be a guy. Now, he had a bone-white face and a nose like a bat, so you knew that he was a bad guy. Well, She-Ra has since been rebooted by Netflix. The protagonist is still blonde and pretty, but now the supporting characters have a range of skin tones, a range of body types, a range of haircuts. What? You mean you can have short hair and still be a girl? The things that never would have existed when I was a child. And if you have a chance, you should really take a look at the little cartoon that they made for International Women's Day. It's adorable. So when I was growing up, the truth was that girls had to look a certain way and behave a certain way in order to be taken seriously. And my girls are growing up with the truth that your actions matter more than your appearance. In 1953, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King sent up this prayer that still applies today. Most gracious and all-wise God, before whose face the generations rise and fall, Thou in whom we live and move and have our being, we thank Thee for all of Thy good and gracious gifts, for life and for health, for food and for raiment, for the beauties of nature and the love of human nature. We come before Thee painfully aware of our inadequacies and shortcomings. We realize that we stand surrounded by the mountains of love, and we deliberately dwell in the valley of hate. We stand amid the forces of truth and deliberately lie. We are forever offered the high road, and yet we choose to travel the low road. For these sins, O God, forgive. Break the spell of that which blinds our minds. Purify our hearts that we may see Thee. O God, in these turbulent days when fear and doubt are mounting high, give us broad visions, penetrating eyes, and power of endurance. Help us to work with renewed vigor for a warless world, for a better distribution of wealth, and for a brotherhood that transcends race or color. I want to believe that the truth is out there. I want to see a fundamental, immutable truth that I can place all of my faith in. But the only way to get to a truth like that is through faith. And I have faith in scientific principles. And I have faith that nothing is as simple as it seems. So maybe the truth isn't out there. Maybe the truth is in here. Here in our hearts and in our minds, and in this web of community that links us to one another. Our understanding of what is truth may change over time, like fractals, where the more closely we look, the more there is to see. Maybe we should, as Dr. King said, purify our hearts. We should purify our hearts of the hubris that leads us to believe that our current understanding is the only way that the facts can be interpreted. And maybe, when we're willing to break the spell of that which blinds our minds, we can finally work toward the truth that all are equal, that all have the right to life and to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness. Blessed be.